Good morning once again. My name's Bill Scrimshire. I am a member of this church, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church on this beautiful, humid, could we just say humid morning? Because we've been dealing with awesome humidity lately. We invite you to check in on social media, and we also want to invite you to make sure your cell phone is silenced. And we also want to welcome not just you, but anyone who's listening to us and watching us on live stream. This is a time we like to introduce visitors. If you're a visitor, we hope you feel comfortable standing, introducing yourself, telling us where you come from. It's really good if you as members have brought a visitor, or if you have encountered a visitor that you can introduce for them. Okay, do we have any visitors? If so, stand and let us know who you are. And here's how you do it. You just get up and say something. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm eldest daughter, and I'm here from Paris.
You're from, go ahead.
And I'm here visiting from Paris, and I would say you can go.
Hello, I'm Carlotta. I'm her daughter and Carolyn's granddaughter. And I'm Kara, and I'm the oldest sister.
And they good. It's wonderful to have them, and they probably win the long distance prize because if you didn't hear, they live in Paris, and we don't mean Paris, Missouri either, Paris, France. Do we have other visitors? Let us back here.
Yeah, my name is Sharita Harris. I've been on Curiosity and hospital community, but I can return, and my son who can't, so he's going to help sing a little song today, so I'm just really glad to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we're glad to have you. We hope you're here on more than you're off in the future. Any other, it's a little hard to see toward the back, and I don't want to miss anyone. So wave or stand up, or a member prod someone and get them to let us know whether they're there. If you're a visitor who has chosen to remain anonymous, you have that right. I did that when I was a visitor. So you are equally welcome. Thank you.
Just outside a hotel conference room, so long ago that I actually used a pay telephone. Remember those? This is how it went. Jack, this is Jack. I'm calling to apologize. I'm in a course where I've been re-examining things that I've held as true. Some from decisions many, many years ago, even as a child. One of those was this: I made you the villain of my life, and I've kept this in place for decades. Now you continue to contact me with cards and letters and gifts, and as you know, I keep what I like and I throw the rest away without a word of acknowledgement or thanks. But even so, you have kept on trying with patience and generosity. Finally, I see that I've been wrong. Nothing ever happened that supports my negative conclusion about you. There's just no evidence for it. I apologize. Please forgive me. I would like for us to be in touch. Perhaps you already know I have 3 boys. I would like for them to meet you and for you to meet them. This occurred during the afternoon of a course that I did with 150 strangers. I was very skeptical because I'd never heard of it before, and I thought I already knew about everything that was important. And the promises of the course sounded flatly impossible. I would have left early, but the course was a gift from a dear friend, and I felt obligated to see it through. Slowly, gradually, I would have left early. I became curious about the other people in the course, amazing things that they said and shared about their lives and the results they said they were getting. I had the breakthrough I described with my father and got back in touch with him after decades of estrangement. It was clear to me that I had participated in something extraordinary, and this was the beginning of my interest in transformation, and that's what I'll be talking about this morning.
Good morning. My name is Khalil, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
We invite you to stand and participate in our opening hymn, Enter, Rejoice, and come in, and remain standing, please, for the covenant immediately following. In our covenant, the words should appear on the screen. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You may be seated. Our next item of business is to hear the All Souls Camp song.
Good morning. Today I'm Professor Katydid of the Academy of the Sacred Flame. Our annual summer camp was a great success. Our professors, prefects, and children created a caring community with each other throughout the camp experience. And we are so proud of everyone who shared their talents, their kindness, their joy, and their helping hands with each other. The majority of our campers are out of town on vacation today. I think it's the parents' last hurrah before the new school year. But our campers who are able to be with us this morning would like to share their camp song with you. Here are the professors, prefects, dream catchers, and wish spinners of the Academy of the Sacred Flame.
This town was when we go walking to our classrooms, ride our brooms, and we get to play Quidditch. This camp is great for you and me. It's your camp. This camp is my camp. From Souls classroom to crematorium. From Hollow bedroom to the ultimate bargain. This camp was made for you and me. This camp was made for you and me.
Can I take mine? Can I take mine home?
We appreciate our youth sharing their camp song with us. Do we have more? Are you ready to go? Okay, we will sing out our youth, but our middle school and senior youth will stay with us here in Bragg. Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessing of your nights and days. Youth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to all where the human spirit leads. And it's time for our offertory.
Good morning, everyone. It's not like super early, but it is morning, right? My name's Sonny, and I'm a proud board member of PeaceWorks Kansas City, which is what your offering is going to help out today. PeaceWorks Kansas City seeks to believe in a world without war and its weapons, and has been active since the early 80s here in Kansas City. I'm so happy to be with such a great group of people that have been doing this longer than I've been alive, and that really is really inspirational to me. And so we do this, we seek to create peace and advocate for peace through activism, awareness, and all various types of programming here in Kansas City. Most recently, and really memorable for me, we just had our 74th remembrance of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which at that event, it was a beautiful event we had at Luce Park next to the pond. And we got to remember not just the lives lost from the bombings, but even the lives lost here at home in Kansas City, in the factories where those bombs were built, where people were hurt by the chemicals and the toxins and took those home to their own families. And so PeaceWorks comes to understand that there's hurt everywhere and there's need for healing everywhere. And so we ask for you to help us out today to be that help and healing in our community as we are here in Kansas City. At our last event, we had a woman named Suki speak about her grandmother who was a survivor of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. She was a doctor at the time, and she told a great, courageous story of her grandmother, how when the sirens would go off, meaning there was an air raid coming in, the planes coming, while most people would duck and cover and go to hide away, her grandmother would run up to the rooftop of the hospital, wearing her doctor's coat, waving her stethoscope in the air, to signal to the planes that this is a hospital, this is a place of healing, this is a place of peace. And when I look around at our cultures and society today, I see a lot of brokenness and a lot of hurt and need for signals for healing and for peace. And so I don't have a stethoscope, I am not a doctor, but I do have this flower, and so I bring this flower to wave it in the air today to ask you to help us advocate for peace in our community. Thank you all so much for having us.
The morning offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I'm just just an old chunk of coal, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday. I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday.
After that rousing moment, join with us in the dedication of the offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Transformation is simple, but it's not easy. If it were easy, the whole world would be transformed, yes? Transformation is slippery. Transformation, being idiomatically hard to grasp, is best captured by Alan Watts' roguish, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." We occupy ourselves, which is to say we preoccupy ourselves, looking for meaning in life, or colloquially, the meaning of life. And clearly the meaning of life isn't readily apparent. So we search for it, yes? We're convinced there's a meaning. Entire lifetimes are spent occupied with trying to unearth it, i.e., with trying to figure it all out. But what if we actually got it right the first time? What if there really is no meaning of life other than the arbitrary meanings we assign to it? This counterintuitive postulate that life really has no meaning is something which can only be fully appreciated when we discard our self-imposed insistence on searching for its non-existent meaning. What is it that opens up and becomes available when we live life as it is, without assigning meaning? What is it that opens up after we've discarded our futile insistence on assigning meaning when there's really none? Consider it's the possibility of living life transformed.
I'm going to talk about transformation, what I call the upside and the downside. I'm going to begin with a disclaimer. I'm not an expert. I provide no assurances or guarantees. I am not an example that you would all want to follow. I love my life. I'm not complaining about it. I wouldn't change a thing. I have no regrets. But there are aspects of my life that you might not approve of. Further, I would like to point out that your experience may vary. So make your own choices and be responsible for them. I also want you to know that if any of you would choose to make transformation a part of your life, nobody gets a toaster or any airline miles. Now, the word transformation can mean many things in different contexts. Are we talking about mathematics or chemistry, or religion, spirituality? I think of transformation in terms of an ongoing inquiry about what's possible for human beings. As a religious humanist, that makes transformation closely related to my religion. I did a little research, believe it or not, and I found some materials about transformation, but none of them seem to have stated exactly the way I wanted to. So I pieced together my own definition. And here's what I would say. I was an English major and I believe in definitions. Transformation is a fundamental or profound change in the meaning system that a person holds as a basis of self-definition, the interpretation of life, and overarching purposes or ultimate concerns. So that's the direction that I'm looking. I want to also begin with, I want to address the difference between transformation and change. I don't think of transformation as simply a synonym for change or even a stronger version of the term change. I think of transformation as something significantly different from change, although there are some similarities. In most of our lives, when we experience change or when we notice it or when the advertising community tells us something has changed, it's certainly recognizable as what it's used to be. This year's cornflakes are recognizable as descended from last year's cornflakes, even though the advertisers claim that they are changed. They're new, they're improved. In my way of thinking, if something is improved, it's not new. It's something that existed already and has been tinkered with. And I'm not opposed to improvements or changes, but they are different from creating new things. And for me, transformation is more about creating something new. Now, we all, or most of us, will recall the famous quotation from the 19th century France where Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr, I'll admit I didn't know his name until recently, said or wrote, "The more things change, the more they remain the same." We've all heard that before. And there's some element of truth in it, that things that are claimed to be changed often turn out to be not much. So let's see. The meaning of transformation goes well beyond that. You know, if we compare a Model T and a Tesla, are we looking at change, or is that enough that we would call it transformation? For me, the example of transformation is when we go to a recognizable vehicle to the transporter room of the Star Trek Enterprise. Okay, that is definitely a transformation in transportation. There are other ways of achieving different kinds of transformation. Some people say that parenthood changes you fundamentally, that your experience of life and the way life seems to you is always different after you've had a child. I wouldn't dispute that, but that's, I think, in a different domain than the kind of transformation that I want to talk about today. The kind of transformation that I experienced in that course where I had that breakthrough with my father, it described itself as a course about personal growth and development. Before I get too far into the topic, I want to mention that there are some other references. There's a book that I recommend. It's called 3 Laws of Performance by Steve Zaffron and Dave Logan. And one of the 3 laws is about how people perform, or it's actually that, how people perform correlates with how their situations occur to them. I think that's an interesting insight. I think very often I want to assert that people who disagree with me must be stupid or misperceive the world or have made some huge mistake. Could be that they simply, the world they're in occurs differently for them. Their situation occurs differently. And that's the kind of insight that could be the basis of an overarching relationship with someone you disagree with. I think mostly, especially in recent times, we see the polarization of viewpoints, and we seem to be losing more and more of our ability to reach across whatever the chasm or divide may be, to have a conversation with someone that might actually be useful in the long run, other than simply angering each other or asserting our differences. The transformation offers a pathway that has occasionally worked. Now, what's the goal of transformation? What I would tell you is it's about a goal for yourself. You do transformation to improve yourself. If you want to do a course on transformation, don't do it to transform someone else, even someone that you're sure really needs it. Do it for yourself first, and then perhaps you could interest them in doing the course for themselves. But it doesn't work for you to do the course and then you try to transform other people. That is a misapplication of the technology, if you will. So the goal, as I understand it, is to be a fully functioning adult, which might be comparable. I'm not certain. I didn't study Maslow in that much detail, but it might be comparable to being self-actualized. Or some of you, I'm sure we have people here who are familiar with this idea of self-actualization. But one way of looking at yourself as you begin undertaking of this type is to think of what if who I am is a network of conversations? A network of conversations. So this puts us in the world of language and conversations about who we are, about how the world works. When I first began to examine the network of conversations that I might be, I found that some of them were still about 13 years old. When I was asked to make a collage, or to make a series of collages about things that I thought were lovely or beautiful or worthwhile, I came up with pictures of women with dark lipstick and high heels and some exaggerated anatomy of the sort that 13-year-olds become preoccupied with. So anyway, that was an example of a part of my life where I was not a fully functioning adult. I was still talking and behaving and thinking in the manner of an adolescent. So that was an opportunity for me to upgrade that particular area of conversations so that I could grow up, so that I could become closer to a fully functioning adult. And that can be part of the journey that you go on if you're interested in pursuing this goal of transformation. A part of it is to, through introspection, self-examination, not unlike what Socrates recommended when he said, "Know thyself," is to examine what's important to you, what your thoughts and beliefs are, what you think you know, who you think you are, with the goal of clearing yourself of constraints. Can you find places in who you are or in your network of conversations where you're stuck or where you're not fully adult? One way of describing, one theory of human knowledge has been compared to a wall of bricks. This metaphor can be used for the foundationalists or the coherent, those who believe that knowledge should be organized in coherent areas based on topics that are mutually supporting. The wall of bricks is like where each brick in the wall represents something you hold as true or something you see as true or valuable. And as you grow and develop, you put together this wall. Some say the most important beliefs are ones that sink to the bottom and become the foundation. Others see it as more of a network, but the wall has always been there. But eventually in life, many people encounter something that conflicts directly with one of the bricks in their walls. Maybe they've been raised to believe something that isn't true, and yet they've spent their life building this wall that includes that brick, or even more than one brick in that same area. Well, where this leads, of course, is Humpty Dumpty, okay? Because when your wall falls down, it can be a pretty big crash. And the experience is, this can be a graphic for what they call cognitive dissonance, when you run into something that doesn't fit. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what that might be, but we all know there have been breakthroughs in knowledge throughout the 20th century and the 21st century. There are things we have found to be true that were completely disbelieved only a few decades ago. When that's important to you, it can be a huge challenge to accept it. Now, if it's something that's not directly a foundation of your life, like if they tell me, oh, we've determined that the Big Bang was not 9 billion years ago, it was 14 billion years ago. Well, I can add that to my knowledge, and it doesn't particularly upset the way I look at the universe or life, or it's an adjustment. But it could be, some of the changes are fundamentally much more challenging than that. One area of life where we see these the elements that we consider important and the way we think we are is the way we present ourselves to others. And some of this is called your story. I think it's pretty much true that everybody has a story. It's kind of like your personal elevator speech. It's like where you're from, where you went to school, what's important to you, are you married or in a relationship, do you have children? And these are strung together events from your life, sometimes great accomplishments, sometimes failures, but things that paint the picture of who you are and the way you present this to other people. your story can be a way of sharing yourself powerfully with other people, but it can also create a kind of a prison for you, because you can create, you can come to believe that you are a particular way. And one of the implications of that is you're not someone or something that can be easily changed. You are what you are. And that's one of the questions about life is, are you nimble? Are you able to adapt and change as your situation may change? Sometimes, not every day, but sometimes when people ask, I tell them, or I let it out, that I don't say that I know my wife. Now, it doesn't mean she's a stranger, or that I haven't been with her for years and years and years. But there is a sort of implication in knowing someone well that you hold them to be in a particular way. And that can actually impinge upon their freedom. What if tomorrow my wife decides to be a different way, to dress differently, to speak differently, to change her job? Is she becoming someone that I don't know? Is it, what are the implications about our relationship? So perhaps a more open, embracing way of looking at it is, I love my wife, and she is free to be different tomorrow than she was yesterday. And I appreciate that. I don't insist that she continue to be just the way she has been. As you look at yourself, the network of conversations, or in other ways, with other tools of transformation or other conversations, one of the questions you encounter is, what part of you is the real you? Is it your story? Is it the voice? Do we all agree that there's a voice we hear from time to time? Are you embarrassed that you have to admit that there's a voice? Some people have it that the voice in their head is the voice of God, the voice of their conscience, the voice of truth. I think the better view is to be skeptical of the voice, not necessarily to disregard it completely, but trusting the voice in your head is not always a good way to operate. If you find, if you're someone whose experience tells you that you have no such issues, that there is no such voice, and that your story is free of any of these problems that others report, you may be the ones that need transformation more than anyone else. Okay? Now, there are several things about human beings that are explored in transformational conversations. Some of it are, one of the unusual terms that I had to learn, although I think it's actually pretty widely used, is this term racket. Do any of you have rackets? Rackets are I think the best model or explanation of a racket is like a 1930s candy store where it all looks very innocent and wholesome in the front window, but you go in the back room and there's a card game going on and people drinking illegal liquor, okay? So the deal with the racket is you hold it out or pretend that it's something quite okay and respectable, but in the back there's some sneaky stuff. And this can take many, many different forms. But it's a technique that people use to avoid responsibility, to hide something that they would be uncomfortable about. Rackets are used, we use rackets to make ourselves right, to keep ourselves from looking bad, to defend things that might otherwise be difficult to defend. Sometimes rackets are used to dominate conversation or dominate other people or to avoid their domination. Once a person seeking transformation has gone through the process of the kind of self-inventory of their past and their story and some of the other elements where there may be limitations, there may be areas where they are disempowered, where their collages show them not to be fully functioning adults. After you've gone through the steps of that inventory, then you get to a place where you can deal with self-definition in a whole new way, and you can actually create who you are. A transformation of the kind that I've studied, at least, is not about finding someone who can transform you. It's about getting to a place where you can transform yourself. And when you get to that place, then self-definition or creation of yourself becomes available. Now, if you were to do that before you've done your self-examination and your inventory, then you bring to it all the places you're already stuck, all the hidden problems that you haven't yet uncovered, the places where you have not achieved the kind of clarity that one needs to actually approach something as powerful as and useful as transformation. Transformation is, it's not about gaining authority, it's not about getting rich, although there are people who have studied transformation who have become rich and some who have become authorities. But transformation is more about obtaining the sort of power that does not require position or corporate structure or rank or any of that. It's a power, most people find it in the ability to speak powerfully so that you can be heard by other people and that they will hear in what you say a possibility that resonates with them and with which they want to align and perhaps even take action. So powerful speaking is one of the goals and part of the payoff that's available through transformation. Transformation is very much about possibility, and the possibilities that are dealt with here are not someday maybe we could have this. They're about things that resonate with people and that make a difference in the moment, that have an impact right now. If I say that someday I will learn to ice skate, not many people are going to want to sign up for that particular bus trip. But if we create some other possibility that resonates with people now, what if we could, let's create a voter registration drive for next year's election that will make a difference. We could find a lot more support for that. These possibilities, to be powerful with them, one needs to know a bit about ontology or ways of being. Westerners, for the most part, are not very good at ontology. They don't see ways of being other than the way they are. I'm the way I am right now because that's the way I am. And that we don't see the choices available to ourselves about ways to be. And a lot of transformation is about uncovering that so that we can distinguish or detect who we're being in the moment and have a choice about who we're going to be. For example, there are many areas where people react emotionally, for example. Certain things can be very reactive. A lot of books and movies are designed out of the palette of human reaction, and it's all about pushing the buttons, if you will, to get people to react in certain emotional ways. Being transformed is about developing the ability not to suppress your emotions. Believe me, that's not it. It's about to experience your emotions, to appreciate your emotions, but to not necessarily be carried away by your emotional reaction. So that the part of you that's in charge is the rational decision-making part of your mind, the part that can make a distinction and the part that can make a choice. Your reactive emotional self isn't particularly strong at that. So it can be extremely valuable to have a choice about it. Possibility and ontology are very powerful tools, and it's extremely valuable to learn how to use them well. But they are kind of user-driven. They don't provide their own content. In other words, you've got to learn how the system works, and then you've got to provide what is the goal that you want to seek in becoming transformed. Do you want to you want to win a gold medal in the Olympics? Do you want to write a novel? Do you want to learn to knit? Believe me, transformation is quite versatile and can be applied to just about anything that you would want to devote yourself to. There's some things I want to mention about conversations for transformation. The first thing you want to learn about is listening. People don't listen. And that includes you. So in learning how you listen and what you're listening for, many of us have seen or heard the phrase that people listen to reply and not to understand. And it can, when you begin to get things like that and get some choice about how you're listening, it can make a big difference in what's available to you. Some of the other things may not seem particularly Zen. I tend to think of transformation as being kind of Eastern, or Buddhist, because I think the Eastern philosophies and Buddhism pay a lot more attention to ways of being than Westerners do. But there's some things to observe. One of them is that if you're in a discussion with someone, or maybe a disagreement, one of the techniques is to recreate what they say, to recreate it exactly the way they've said it, and without shading it, without injecting your knowing, sarcastic, view with which you indicate you don't agree with them, but to actually give it right back to them exactly the way they gave it to you so that they can hear it that way. And that recreation, it turns out, it surprised me, but recreation turns out to be a very powerful tool because it gives a person an experience of being heard that's pretty unusual, and also of hearing themselves so they can see and hear newly what might be wrong or missing from that kind of a statement. There are some terms used in transformation that are different from our ordinary usage. The common usage of the term integrity we imply to be a kind of a mixed message that includes a moral element, someone with high values and morals that we would recognize and support, and also a person who the content of what they're saying is coherent, it makes sense, there's a certain consistency about them. In transformational work, that can be, it can be useful to have separate terms that can deal with those different elements. To be able to speak about the structural workability of something without necessarily expressing a view about its morality. Transformation is mostly not about morality. They don't try to tell people what's who to vote for or what's the better choice. There's a certain confidence that once you're transformed, you'll be able to sort those things out for yourself, and you don't need to be told. And further, people don't react well to that. I can't tell you what to believe, but there are some things that might be useful to you that I can share. And if you try them on, you may find that some of those things are practices or insights or useful ideas that you would want to continue to operate with. Another term that is used differently in transformational work, at least in my experience it is about being coachable. And this is a very non-athletic kind of application of the term coachable, but it's a willingness to try to follow the suggestions of a coach. If you're serious at all about transformation, at some point, fairly early in that process, you want to find someone who can be your coach. And someone who is familiar with the sort of work you're doing, and someone who's willing to listen to you and to take the time to give you coaching. It doesn't do well to try to do transformation totally on your own or just in your own mind. That's dangerous turf. So having a coach is valuable. But being coachable means not only to listen to your coach, but also to at least give it a try with whatever your coach is suggesting, even if it seems like entirely the wrong thing to do. Give it a try that way. See what's available out of taking the coaching. Transformational work that I've done has a different concept of leadership than what I was previously familiar with. And a transformational leader doesn't have to have authority. It doesn't have to be at the front of the room. Doesn't have to be speaking at the microphone. A transformational leader can lead from the back of the room. Some of those things are a little challenging to get your hands around, but I think it's useful to open up your idea about what it takes. If you decide for yourself, I have no opportunity to be a leader here because I'm not the one at the front of the room, you've actually ripped everybody off, because there are things you can contribute from other positions. I'll admit some of this is maybe a little bit hard to get, but that's the reason I'm taking the time to tell you about it. Transformation is not pie in the sky, and it's not about having good feelings. It's actually about achieving specific measurable results. And if you're not getting specific measurable results, then you're not doing it right. Maybe you need to read a different book or join a different group or get a different coach, because specific measurable results are the reasons to seek and practice transformation. Now, the title of this piece, I said I was going to address the downside of transformation. Maybe you've detected already that I'm pretty much in favor of transformation. So I don't have a huge list of things on my downside, but there are some that I want to share with you. Probably the biggest danger of transformation is you think you know. You get transformed and you think you know. Some of you already think you know without even pursuing transformation. And the fact is, I assert, when you think you know, you shut down. When you're open up, when you're interested, when you're available to consider or even learn something new, you're addressing a question. You're not coming to it from a point of, I think I already know. I've lived a lot of my life coming from a place of, I think I already know this, and I stopped listening. So I missed a lot, but I know this is very real. There's also a willingness to be wrong and a willingness to look bad. Being transformed isn't always being a hero or looking good or being right. I was wrong about my dad in a pretty huge way. And it took me a long time to get to that. But I would say it was worth it. Some describe transformation as being willing to give up the person you have been in order to be the person you could be. And I think there's something to that. There's a temporality, there's an element where that is a pretty accurate description. But you don't get to be the person you could be without giving up some of whom you've been. It doesn't mean you have to reject your previous life, but you have to get free of it. A big problem with changing yourself is that you think you already know who you are, and that's kind of what you're stuck with. You know, people don't change. That's what we believe, is that mostly people don't change. Mostly we don't change. No matter how many times I swear that I'm going to eat less sugar, by the end of the week, I've eaten some sugar. You know, and one can become discouraged by that. There's also an expanded area of responsibility that comes with transformation. Most of my life, my strategy was to minimize the part of life where I was going to be responsible. For God's sake, I went to law school, which is all about avoiding liability, right? So you don't want to be responsible. Transformed people realize that the parts of life where you can make a difference, you have a responsibility. Now, you may choose to act on it or not, but responsibility is actually the earmark of parts of your life where you can make a difference, or you could make a difference. So this expanded sense of responsibility can be daunting. When I first encountered it, I didn't want a piece of that. You're gonna tell me that I'm responsible for the state of the world, for the starvation and malnutrition and war, and well, I think there's a way of looking at life that says you can make a difference in those things if you want to apply yourself. Now, not everybody is going to make that a priority. But at this point, the best I can say is be open to enlarging your sense of responsibility. Not in a way that daunts you. I mean, not to be burdened by it, not to have it be a crushing weight. But ultimately, it's kind of an opportunity. that one can look at different ways. There are some things about relationships that can impact who you are in a relationship and how you deal with it. One thing that I try to do is to give my relationship a vote. And I think one of the least effective ways to be in a relationship is 50-50. If the most you're willing to give a relationship is 50% effort, then wow, that's a pretty grim rule book. The best relationships are the ones where it's 100% and 100%. And many people, and I would join them in saying the relationship should get a vote. I mean, some days you might be ready to walk away, but if you give your relationship a vote, relationships generally vote to survive. So give a presumption in the direction of maintaining your relationship. Integrity is a surprisingly difficult thing to manage as even with all the tools of transformation. Integrity is always going out. And a lot of it is just with yourself. You know, so you compromise or change things you've told yourself you were going to do, and you treat it like, well, that's just me. That doesn't mean anything. If I told the doorman that I'd bring him a cupcake, that's more important than whether I told myself I was going to lose a pound this week. You know? Not so. You count. What you tell yourself and the integrity you keep for yourself is extremely valuable. One of the worst dangers, or in the downside of transformation, is that people will use transformational tools in untransformed ways. Transformation can be very powerful, and the tools that are learned and shared about the way people operate can be quite powerful. So sometimes out of frustration maybe, people who know better will try to transform someone else other than themselves. That's a bad idea. You can hurt people that way. One thing to remember is that other people in the world have not generally requested your coaching. So even if you think you might know what they ought to do, it's generally a bad idea to give coaching unless you've been requested to do that. So I've provided you with a bit of the upside and downside of transformation. It's not an easy topic to encompass in a few minutes. I think my goal today was to challenge you. And believe me, many of you look pretty challenged at this point. I would encourage you to, if this resonates at all, you might give it some thought. You might consult a book or two. You might find out that there are people here at All Souls who've done quite a bit of transformational work. Some of them can explain it better than I have. If any of these things interest you, I encourage you to pursue it, but you do have to be responsible for your own choices. So sometimes transformation kind of opens the doors, things that you've been suppressing for a long time. People who've been unhappily married sometimes get divorced after they learn a bit about transformation. Sometimes divorced people get back together because they see ways to handle the problems that got them apart. So it can be used in lots of ways, ways that you may not expect. So allow yourselves to be surprised. Thank you.
Stand as you're able and join us in our final song, which is Not in Vain, the Distant Beacon.
Do I extinguish the flame? Let me do that. Okay. I extinguish the flame, but not the burning flame of curiosity that continues with all of us.